never did it. But when you go back and check the records, when I checked where the magnetic fields have been in the past and their normal path where the magnetic north is, they've got it documented for almost 1,000 years. And I went back and I plotted where the years that I believe that this planet X has passed. And then I drew a circle around the North Pole pertaining to that to give me an average. This next year, we're inside that circle, meaning a high probability that it's near, because that's where it's been in the past. When it gets close to that area, that means this object is within a year or two of reaching it. And
that's very interesting.
Changing the magnetic fields or changing our jet stream. Mm-hmm. When it changes the jet stream, you got your climate that's way off, and that's why.
Well, even NASA scientists are now saying, Gill, that we are in the beginnings of a mini ice age, and that is the best they can come up with, but they don't tell us why or anything. They just say it's going to last for a few years. But I knew because I've been following this topic for a while, that this is being caused, this anomaly in the weather patterns is being caused by the approximation of this object that is beginning to enter our solar system. But, of course, we are not going to be told that, are we?
No. And another pointer that you can go throughout history is look for 7-year periods of drought. It's throughout the Bible and it's through history, these major parts of drought. Like during the Dark Ages, this object is what starts this thing to occur. And you see major earthquakes that are misrecorded when the thing passes by. Now, if we're in winter at the time that it's passing through March, only thing we get visually is something about when you look at the night sky at night, if you know your stars and your planets, you can pick out Jupiter and you can pick out Venus quite easily, because they're the brightest objects in the sky. Jupiter is larger, but Venus is brighter. Well, at the maximum distance from it, as it's rounding the sun, what it would appear to us would be about equal to the size of Jupiter in a visual respect, but it's brighter than Venus. Okay, so it had been just another bright object in the sky and it probably have a tail, because the Chinese described it as having a tail. Okay, and this is the same object that Constantine saw when it rounded the sun, and he said he saw a star in the sky. It was this object. The time frame
is the same object he saw. Wow, I had never heard anyone say that before, but that always stuck in the back of my head. What was it that Constantine saw? Because he definitely saw something.
Yes. Now, it was probably a few months prior to that battle that they got it labeled in. But that's the size of the object that they would have seen. Now, if you look at the time of Joshua and Joshua's battle, there's additional data that's found outside the Bible. It's in the Talmud. Not all the Talmud is correct, but it's not all wrong neither, because it has historical documentation of things that happened, okay? And it states during Joshua's time that him and his men saw an object in the sky 50 times the diameter of the moon. Well, this is one of the times that we can calculate the size, okay? If you put this object that I'm saying that's 7 times the diameter of Earth, roughly halfway between the moon and Earth, you have a representation of 50 to 1.
That's pretty big.
From a viewpoint of Earth. Right. This would also, if you back it up a few hours in its path. Now, remember, the path of it is passing between the moon. Now, the tail is not pointing in line with its path. The tail is pointing opposite of the sun. That's because it's the solar wind that's causing the tail. So now you have the tail pointed at Earth, wherein the path is taking it in front of Earth. Got it?
Right.
Can you picture that?
Sure.
Well, when that tail, when Earth is entering into the tail, the plasma field, remember this is clear. It's just a bright light, but it's Earth is going into the plasma field. Now that's stopping the natural energy from the sun going into our north and south pole, causing Earth to slow down in its rotation 4.5 to 5.5% per hour, compounded hourly. And guess what you have within about a little bit over 24 hours? You get the Earth to stop without mile-high tidal waves.
Wow.
Just like the accounts of Joshua says. I took this model. I'll show it to a physics professor. He took a few minutes to study it, and this is his quote. He says, I'm the first one to explain this phenomenon logically because the model works. Earth can slow down. There's two camps of theory on what is ruling the universe. The astronomers say gravity is ruling the planets. The physicists say it's electromagnetic in nature. The story of Joshua proves out that the universe is ruled by electromagnetic, not gravity. Because if it had been gravity ruled, it would have grabbed us and carried us out into a further orbit, and we would have froze to death. End of story. There'd been no more stories to write. Okay? If we have electromagnetic, guess what they would do? They would attract like two magnets. That's exactly what happens.
Right.
In the stories. We've had 2 or 3 times that Earth is tilted. One time is during the time of Joseph. Remember the 7 years of plenty, 7 years of drought?
Mm-hmm. Right.
This object comes about midway of the drought. You have 3.5 years drought coming in, 3.5 years drought as it leaves. Now, you may ask, how do I know that Earth tilted? From an artifact in Germany called the Nebra disk.
Yeah, can you talk about it? Yeah, can you explain that a bit, Gill?
Sure. The Nebra disk was an artifact that some grave robbers, I'll call that, but they weren't robbing a human grave, but they were robbing the site of ancient artifacts. They found this. It's I think a copper disc with gold leaf objects that represent the star patterns, as well as the moon and the sun, and the surrounding area, the horizons. And the copper is tarnished a nice green. And they were caught trying to sell this. I think it was in maybe Switzerland somewhere. And the authorities caught them. The Germans already caught, and the object was brought back, and now it's in a museum. Now, they had a few experts that tried to discern everything, and then I've read them, and I kind of disagree with some of their findings. Number one, they say the lower part of this disc is not the horizon in front. They make the claim that it's the Egyptian boat Styx that ferries the dead across the river. Well, I got a question. How did the Germans in mid of Europe ever go to Egypt to be able to get this information? And instead, when you go to Google, when you go to the site where the ancient Miss Observatory is, and look where they were looking at in the night sky, exactly in front of them is an old riverbed. They have a dam that closed off the riverbed. They had to reroute the river because of the dam, but if you put it where the old river is, that's exactly what was in front of the observer, which is at the base of the Nebra disk. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, another thing that the experts missed was the moon, the illuminated side of the moon, is facing the wrong direction. Illuminated side of the moon has to face towards the sun. So when they were looking at the moon, they said, well, with that shaped crescent, it was X amount of days old. Let's say the cycle of a moon is 29 and something days old. Well, they got that wrong, because now you got to reverse it 180 degrees. You know, it's either 3 days or it's 28 days, one of the two. Somewhere, so they had the wrong time frame they're looking for. And so that throws off the timing on when to estimate the years on when this thing was made. They had estimated it was outside the Bronze Age, and they thought that was so phenomenal that it was outside the Bronze Age, but it was not, because they were dating it wrong. Once I corrected the errors in it and opened the software and started looking for a date, it matched the same date as Joseph of Egypt.
Wow.
And that disk, on the bottom left corner, there's a constellation called Orion. In the month of Passover, which this disk frames the month because it has a constellation to the right and a constellation to the left there. Give me a moment and I'll find the what constellation that I'm talking about here. Give me one moment. I'll pull up some data here. And it's the constellation Gemini to the left and Capricorn to the right. Okay? Well, when Mr. Orion is seen from the bottom, you cannot see the constellation Mr. Orion from Germany during the time of March. Only way that you could do that is if the Earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees. The sun is shown there, but you can't see the stars with the sun. So the sun is shown as an eclipse. It's being darkened. The moon to the right tells you the moon was not involved with this eclipse. You can only have a new moon to eclipse the sun. If it's in a crescent shape, that means it's not a new moon, and it cannot be it's involved.
Now, let me ask you a question, because you mentioned a few things very, very, very interesting, and I have a couple of questions that I need to ask you. First of all, you mentioned Orion, and I don't know if you're aware, but